The restaurant was perfect. Candlelight, anniversary dinner. Her husband reaching across the table, covering her hand with his, saying the words she had heard every year for 17 years. Happy anniversary. She smiled back at him, and then her phone buzzed. One time, just once. She looked down. An unknown number, 11 words.
I'm here for you.
Your husband's mistress is pregnant. Don't react. She looked back up at her husband's face, still smiling, still talking, still completely unaware that the woman sitting across from him had just read those 11 words and felt her entire life divide into before and after. She did not react. She picked up her wine glass. She took a sip, and she made a decision quietly under that candlelight that would change everything. This is the story of what she did next, and how a woman who had been slowly disappearing inside her own marriage finally found her way back to herself. Lesson statement. Sometimes the most devastating text you will ever receive is also the one that sets you free. Meaning plus value for the audience. This story is for every woman who has ever silenced her own instincts to keep the peace. For every woman who looked at the life she built and wondered how she became invisible inside it. Claire's journey is not just about betrayal. It is about what happens when a woman stops shrinking, stops apologizing for knowing what she knows, and starts choosing herself. Not loudly, not dramatically, but with the quiet and unstoppable certainty of someone who has finally had enough. If you have ever loved someone more than you trusted yourself, this story is for you. If Claire's story moved you, if any part of it felt familiar, if you found yourself nodding along at 2 a.m. when no one else is watching, you are not alone. Hit the like button so more women find this story when they need it most. Leave a comment below and tell us, what was the moment you finally stopped reacting and started planning? Subscribe to this channel because every week we bring you stories about real strength, real women, and real second chances. And share this with someone who needs to hear it today. You might not know who needs it. Share it anyway.
The phone buzzed once, just once, and Claire Whitmore's life divided into before and after in the time it took to read 11 words. She almost did not look. The phone was on her lap under the white linen tablecloth, face down, the way she always kept it during dinner. Douglas had strong opinions about phones at the table. He had strong opinions about many things. After 17 years, she had learned which opinions were worth the energy of disagreeing with. The candles at Carmine's were lit low, the way they always were, on a Friday evening. The breadbasket sat between them, half empty. Douglas had ordered the Barolo without asking her, which once would have felt romantic and now felt like a habit. He ran on autopilot. The restaurant smelled like garlic and warm bread and something faintly sweet from the dessert cart that rolled past their table every 20 minutes. It was their wedding anniversary, 17 years. Douglas was mid-story, the kind of story that required both hands, something about Brett from the Charlotte office, and a conference call that had gone sideways in a very funny way, apparently. She could tell from his expression that she was approaching the punchline. She knew his punchline expression the way she knew the sound of the third step on their staircase. 17 years of data. She nodded. She smiled. She picked up her wine glass. The phone buzzed. She looked down from instinct. The children, probably. Neil wanting to know where the remote was. Shay asking what time they would be home. The screen lit with a notification from an unknown number. A text message. 7 words and a command. She read it once. Your husband's mistress is pregnant. Don't react. She read it twice. The wine glass was still in her hand. She was aware of that. She was aware of Douglas finishing the story about Brett, reaching the punchline, laughing at his own punchline the way he always did, the way that used to make her laugh too, by pure reflex. She read the message a third time. Douglas said something. She laughed at the right moment. She knew she laughed at the right moment because his expression settled into satisfaction. She read the message a fourth time, then she deleted it. Then she opened her deleted messages folder. Then she read it a fifth time. Her thumb hovered over the unknown number for 12 seconds, she counted. She put the phone face down in her purse and set the purse on the floor by her feet. She picked up her wine. She took a sip. The Barolo tasted like nothing. Like warm liquid, with no particular properties. She was aware of this in the way you become aware of ordinary sensations when something extraordinary is happening beneath them. Douglas had moved on to a different story. Something about a colleague named Patterson and a parking situation at the office that was apparently also very funny. Claire nodded. She tore a piece of bread from the basket. She put it in her mouth. It tasted like nothing. She had gotten good at nodding. 17 years of nodding. She could nod in her sleep. She might have been nodding in her sleep for years. Your husband's mistress is pregnant. The restaurant sounds went slightly distant, the way they do when you are sitting in a crowd but suddenly very alone. The clink of glasses at the table behind them, the murmur of other people's dinner conversations, someone laughing too loudly near the bar. The soft jazz that Carmine's played on Friday evenings, instrumental, forgettable, reliable. She looked at her husband's face across the candlelight. He was handsome. He had always been handsome. 44 years old, and still the kind of man who got a second look from the hostess when they walked in. Dark hair threaded with gray at the temples now. Good jaw. Good shoulders. He'd kept himself in shape, which she had always taken as a compliment, had always told herself meant he still cared what she thought of him. He was laughing again. He had no idea. Don't react. She took another sip of wine. Her phone buzzed again inside her purse. She left it there, Douglas said. You're quiet tonight. Just listening, she said. He reached across the table and covered her hand with his. His hand was warm. She had held this hand in a hospital waiting room. She had held this hand when her mother died. She had held this hand in the dark on 100 unremarkable nights and told herself that was what love looked like after 17 years. She turned her hand over and held his back. He smiled at her, the full smile, not the polite one. Happy anniversary, he said. Happy anniversary, she said. Her voice was perfectly steady. She was faintly surprised by this. She had expected her voice to shake. It did not shake. It came out warm and even, and exactly as it always sounded, and she filed this away as information about herself she had not previously had. She could do this. She could sit at this table, in this restaurant, on this anniversary, and she could smile and hold his hand, and eat the food that arrived in courses, and drink the wine he had chosen, and let him tell his stories about Brett and Patterson and the parking situation, and she could give nothing away at all. The question was why the anonymous sender had told her not to react. The question was, who knew enough to send it? The entrees arrived. Douglas complimented her dress. The blue one, the one he'd always said he loved. She'd worn it deliberately, the way she always wore it on anniversaries, the way she had worn it 100 times without ever stopping to ask herself if she loved it. She ate her salmon. She listened. She laughed twice more, both times correctly timed. At 9:47, she excused herself to the restroom. She rounded the corner, out of Douglas's sight line, and walked to the back of the restaurant. The ladies' room at Carmine's had marble sinks and a long mirror and small arrangements of white flowers on the counter that were changed every Thursday. She pushed through the door. She stood at the sink with both hands on cold porcelain and looked at herself in the mirror. She looked exactly the same. She thought she should look different. She thought destroyed people looked different. She thought there should be some visible evidence of the thing that had just happened, some alteration in the architecture of her face, some mark. There was nothing. Same brown eyes, same mouth, same fine lines at the corners that she had been managing with a cream Douglas had once called unnecessary. Same woman, same face. She turned on the cold water. She held her wrists under it for 30 seconds. She dried her hands on the paper towel. She checked her lipstick. She smoothed her dress. She went back to the table. Douglas was on his phone. "A work email," he said when she sat down. He put it face down on the table. She noticed the angle. She noticed the way his shoulder relaxed when she sat down. The micro release of tension, as if he had been doing something that required her absence and was relieved by her return. She had seen this before. She had always seen this. She had simply, 100 times, decided not to know what she was seeing. Dessert came. Tiramisu. Douglas ordered 2 forks. She ate 3 bites. He ate the rest and did not notice she had stopped. The check came. He paid it. He held her coat. He took her hand walking to the car. He opened her door. She got in. She buckled her seatbelt. She looked straight ahead through the windshield at the parking lot of the restaurant where they had their first date. And she thought, I am sitting in a car with a man who has a pregnant girlfriend. I am in his car. I cooked dinner for him on Wednesday. I bought his mother a birthday card last week and signed his name. Douglas got in, started the engine, pulled out of the parking lot. He began talking about the Charlotte trip again. She nodded. The drive home was 17 minutes. The porch light came on automatically when Douglas pulled into the driveway. It always did. Sensor light, installed 3 summers ago, one of Douglas's weekend projects. She had watched him install it from the kitchen window, had brought him a glass of water, had thought, this is what a good marriage looks like. 2 people in a house, one of them fixing a light. Douglas got out. She said she needed a minute. Something in the back seat. There was nothing in the back seat. He went inside. She sat in the car in the driveway and stared at the front door closing behind him, and she did not move. The porch light stayed on. She watched it. She could see the living room light through the front window, the specific warm glow of the lamp by the couch, the lamp that had been in her mother's house before it was in theirs. She could see the shadow of Douglas moving inside, going toward the kitchen probably, getting water before bed. She could not make herself go inside. The problem was not that she didn't know what to do. The problem was that inside that house were 2 teenagers who still believed their family was one thing. The moment she walked through that door, she was going to have to start lying to them, or start breaking their world. She was not ready to do either. She sat in the driveway for 22 minutes. She knew it was 22 minutes because she watched the clock on the dashboard and she needed something specific to focus on. 22 minutes in the driveway of the house she had lived in for 11 years. The house she had chosen. The neighborhood she had pushed for. The garden in the front that she had planted herself. The hydrangeas, the ornamental grasses, the flagstone path she had designed by tearing pictures out of magazines. Neil appeared at the front window. He peered out, 14 years old, round-faced, confused. She waved at him. A normal wave. The everything is fine wave. He disappeared. She got out of the car. She went inside. Douglas was already upstairs. She could hear the shower. She checked on the children. Shaya's door was closed with music coming softly through it. Neil was back on the couch. The remote, finally located, a nature documentary on the television. She sat with him for 7 minutes. She watched penguins do something difficult in Antarctic wind. She kissed the top of his head. She went upstairs. She washed her face. She brushed her teeth. She changed into her pajamas in the bathroom with the door locked, which she never did, which she had never needed to do before, which was, she understood, the first of many things that were going to be different now. Douglas was in bed reading when she came out. He looked relaxed. He looked like a man who had had a good anniversary dinner with his wife and was now reading a chapter before sleep. She got in on her side. He put down the book. He rolled toward her. Good anniversary? He asked. Really good, she said. He kissed her temple. She let him. He rolled back over. She heard his breathing slow. In 12 minutes, he was asleep. She had measured this before, his time from horizontal to unconscious. 12 minutes on a normal night. 8 minutes when he'd had more than 2 drinks. She lay on her back and stared at the ceiling. She made a list in her mind. Attorney, bank accounts, her sister in Portland, in that order. She thought, I'm not crazy. I felt something was wrong for 2 years. Every time I apologized for being suspicious, every time he made me feel guilty for asking where he was, every time I talked myself out of what I already knew. I wasn't paranoid. I was right. She had been right. The ceiling had 47 tiles, counting the half tiles at the edges. She had never counted them before. She counted them now. She counted them twice to be sure. At 2 in the morning, Douglas deep and steady beside her, she reached across the nightstand. She had learned his passcode 6 months ago. She had watched him type it from across the kitchen. A reflex, not deliberate, and she had stored it away in a mental pocket without asking herself why. She had known, on some level, that she was saving it. She had known, on some level, that she was already preparing for something she was not ready to name. She typed it now. The texts were not hidden in any clever way. They were right there in his messages under the name Renata. No last name. A contact photo that was just a small yellow sun emoji. She opened the thread. She read 14 months backward, beginning from most recent. She read 20 messages. She stopped. She did not read more. She had read enough. He loved her. In his way, in his careful word-selected way, he loved Renata. That was somehow worse than if he hadn't. If it had been purely physical, Claire could have told herself a story about men and weakness and proximity and choices made in moments of low judgment. She had been holding that story in reserve for 2 years. That possible explanation, that forgivable version. But these were not physical texts. These were texts from a man who was fully, entirely, emotionally present for someone who was not his wife. These were the texts of a man who asked how her day was and remembered what she said and followed up and made plans and said good morning. The things a husband does. The things Douglas had stopped doing for her so gradually she had not noticed the stopping until it was complete. She put his phone back exactly as she'd found it. She went to the bathroom. She sat on the edge of the cold bathtub in the dark. She sat there for a long time. The last thing she had looked at before closing the thread was a photo, saved in a folder he had labeled Site Visits. A woman, young, dark-haired, laughing at something off-camera in the bright light of what looked like a kitchen. She was laughing the way people laugh when they don't know they're being photographed. She looked, Claire thought, like someone who did not yet know what was going to happen to her. She looked like Claire, 17 years ago. She sat on the edge of the bathtub until the sky outside the bathroom window began to lighten, from black to gray. Then she got up. She washed her face again. She went back to bed. She lay perfectly still beside her husband and thought, who sent that text? And why did they tell me not to react? The morning was ordinary. This was the thing no one told you, that the morning after your world ended was still just a morning. The coffee maker made its noise. The bread needed toasting. Neil came downstairs sideways, still mostly asleep, looking for the orange juice. Douglas left at 7:45. He kissed her on the cheek. He smelled like his usual soap. He said he might be late. She said, "Okay." She drove Shay to school at 8:15. Shay had earphones in and did not speak. Claire watched her daughter walk through the school entrance, this tall 16-year-old who had her grandmother's eyes, and thought, she does not know yet. For a few more hours, she does not know. She came home. She sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee. The coffee went cold. She did not move for 40 minutes. The memories came the way they always come when something breaks open. Not in order, not dramatically, not in a rush of cinematic scenes. They came as intrusions. She was staring at the window, and suddenly she was at the beach 2 summers ago, watching Douglas teach Neil to body surf, thinking, this is what it's supposed to feel like. This warmth, this specific ordinary joy. And then she thought, he had a conference call that Thursday. He left the beach house at 10 in the morning and came back at 2 and said the call ran long. The memory did not disappear. It just changed color. That was the hard thing about tainted memories. They did not go away. They stayed exactly the same and meant something completely different. Like a word you learned had another definition. Like a song you loved that you found out was written for someone else. She sat at the kitchen table and let them come. The new password on his phone 8 months ago. The specific cologne that appeared one fall and then became normal. The way he had started closing his laptop when she walked into the room, the fluid, casual movement of it, practiced. The evenings he was late. Not many evenings. He was careful. She understood that now. He had been careful. But enough evenings, enough closed laptops, enough conference calls, that ran long on beach Thursdays. She thought, I filed all of this in a drawer labeled, Don't Open. I labeled it myself. I locked it myself. I put the key somewhere I would have to work to find it. She had not wanted to know. She had known, and she had not wanted to know. And those were two different things that could both be true at the same time. She picked up her phone. She called Beverly Calloway at 9:15. Bev picked up on the second ring. Hey, what's... Claire told her everything. One long sentence. Beginning at the restaurant, the text, the bathroom mirror, the driveway, the 2 in the morning, the 14 months of texts, the photo in the folder labeled Site Visits. She stood in her kitchen, in yesterday's mascara, and said all of it, without stopping and without crying. There was a brief silence. Then Bev said, Okay, listen, get your bank statements from the last 2 years. Don't ask him anything yet. Do you have any cash of your own? Separate account? Yes, Claire said. The one from my mother's. Don't touch it. Don't move anything. I'm coming over at noon. Do you have coffee? It's cold. Make more. That was Bev. No crying. No, oh, honey. No long, horrified intake of breath. Just a hand finding her elbow in the dark, pointing forward. She made more coffee. She sat back down. She opened her laptop. She typed, How long does an affair usually last? Then, can a marriage survive if the other woman is pregnant? Then, what does it mean when your husband stops asking how your day was? Then, signs your husband is in love with someone else. She deleted her search history. Then she sat there and cried about deleting it, because she had just erased evidence of her own pain. She had erased evidence of her own pain the way she had been erasing it for 2 years, instinctively, automatically, the reflex of a woman who had learned that her own distress was an inconvenience. She had been erasing herself for years. She did not open a new search. She sat with that thought until Bev arrived at noon. But before Bev arrived, something else happened. She had the unknown number still in her deleted messages. She had undeleted it that morning before Douglas woke, needing to see it again. She put the number into a reverse lookup app that Bev had mentioned once for spam calls. She was not sure it would work. It worked. The number belonged to a woman named Sandra Whitmore. Sandra Whitmore. She sat very still. Douglas had a cousin named Sandra. He almost never mentioned her. When he did, it was briefly, dismissively. Unstable, he'd said, dramatic. Someone who had caused problems at family events and was better kept at a distance. Claire had met her twice, at a Whitmore Thanksgiving 3 years ago, and briefly at a funeral. She barely remembered what she looked like. She typed Sandra Whitmore into Facebook. Sandra's profile was not private. Her profile picture was of herself and another woman, arms around each other, laughing in what looked like a break room. A work selfie. The caption, posted 8 months ago, read, "Best work friend, forever and always." The other woman had dark hair. She was laughing. Claire had seen that laugh in a photo on her husband's phone labeled Site Visits. Sandra Whitmore had been Renata Spence's work friend before she had figured out the connection to her own cousin. And when she figured it out, she had done the only honest thing anyone in that entire situation had done in 14 months. She had come to Claire, and she had told her not to react, because Sandra knew Douglas. She knew what he would do if Claire came in without documentation, without preparation, without everything she needed. He would make Claire the volatile one. He would make Claire the reason the marriage failed. Someone in his own family had protected her. The doorbell rang at noon. Bev came in with a tray from the coffee place on Mercer Street and a yellow legal pad and the focused energy of someone who had been waiting to be useful in exactly this way for a long time. She sat down. She opened the legal pad. She uncapped a pen. "Tell me again," she said. "All of it. Slower." They went through it together. Bev wrote things down. She asked specific questions. What bank? What accounts? Was Claire's name on everything or just the joint accounts? Was the house in both names? What about the investment portfolio? They spread 3 months of bank statements across the kitchen table. Bev found something on the second page of the second statement, a recurring transfer to a business account under the name Spence Whitmore Consulting, LLC. They looked at each other. "Pull that up," Bev said. The LLC was registered 14 months ago, the same month the texts began. Claire sat back in her chair. She looked at the ceiling. She thought about her mother's kitchen, the way it smelled on Sunday mornings, the way her mother had moved around it with complete authority, knowing exactly where everything was and why and for how long it had been there. Her mother had left her $43,000. Claire had put it in a separate account. She had told herself it was savings. She pulled up that account on her laptop. The account still had money in it. She checked the joint savings account. The joint savings account was down $30,000 from where it had been 8 months ago. She stared at the number. Not her mother's money, his redirecting of their money. But it felt the same. It felt like the same violation. She said out loud to Bev, at her own kitchen table, "I deserved better than a man who needed me to be smaller so he could feel bigger. I kept shrinking. I kept thinking if I asked for less, he would give me more. That is not love. That is a hostage negotiation." Bev put down her coffee. "Write that down," she said. "What?" "What you just said. Write it down. You are going to need to remember that you said that." Bev left at 3. She left with instructions, a list of names, and the number of a divorce attorney named Gordon Aldridge, who Bev described as expensive, precise, and constitutionally unable to lose. She also left with something she had been carrying for 3 years. "Claire," she said at the door, one hand on the frame, "I need to say something, and I need you to let me finish before you respond." Claire looked at her. "At Christine's thing, back in April of last year, I heard something. It was secondhand, and I couldn't verify it, and I didn't know a name, and I—" She stopped. "I knew there was someone. I didn't know who. I kept waiting to be certain before I said anything. I kept thinking if I was wrong, I would destroy your marriage over a rumor. Claire, I'm sorry." Claire stood in her own doorway and looked at her best friend's face, which was doing something complicated and honest, and she thought, I knew Bev didn't trust him. I never asked her why, because I didn't want to say it out loud yet. "It's okay," Claire said. "It's not." "No, Claire said. It's not, but it is what it is, and you're here now. Bev hugged her, a real one, both arms, not the shoulder pat kind. Then she left. Claire called Gordon Aldridge's office at 3:15. His assistant put her in for 2 o'clock the following Tuesday. She wrote it in her phone under the name dental appointment. She had not been to a dentist in 2 years. This felt accurate. That evening, Douglas came home at 6:30. Dinner was on the table. She had made it from scratch. Something she hadn't done in months. A roasted chicken with vegetables. The kind of dinner that required actual effort. He was pleased by this. Slightly unsettled by it, too. She could see the small confusion move across his face. The effort of the dinner against the slight distance in her manner. 2 signals that didn't quite match. He kissed her cheek. He poured himself a glass of water. They sat down. Shay came to the table with a book under her arm, which Douglas gently redirected to the counter. Neil arrived at a run, already talking about something that had happened in PE. The dinner was normal. She passed dishes. She asked questions. She laughed at the right times. Over dessert, she had made dessert too, which she never did on a weeknight, which Douglas definitely noticed. He cleared his throat. I've been thinking, he said. We've both been a little distant lately, both of us. I know I've been stressed with work, and I think you've had a lot going on, and he paused. Maybe we should look into counseling, just to recalibrate. Some couples do it as maintenance, not just crisis. He said some couples do it as maintenance. He had researched how to say this. She could hear the research in the phrasing. She looked at him across the table. She picked up her water glass. Maybe, she said. He nodded. He looked relieved. He reached over and touched her hand briefly, the gesture of a man who believed he had just handled something skillfully. She smiled at him. After dinner, she washed the dishes. Douglas helped dry, which he rarely did. He was performing the marriage the way he did when he was managing something. She recognized it the way she recognized the 3rd step on the staircase. The children went to their rooms. Douglas fell asleep at 10:15. At 11, she got up. She went to the kitchen. She turned on the under-cabinet lights, the low ones, just enough. She opened the spice cabinet. She reorganized it alphabetically, allspice to turmeric. Every jar in order. Then she did it again, by height. She found 12 expired jars and threw them away. She wiped down every shelf with a damp cloth. She replaced each jar precisely. It took 40 minutes. It was the only thing she could fully control. The cumin went before the dill. She knew exactly where things belonged. For the first time in 2 days, she felt organized. The next morning, she called Gordon Aldridge's office and moved the appointment to Monday. She could not wait until Tuesday. Gordon Aldridge's office was on the 14th floor of a building downtown, quiet and well lit, with a view of the river and furniture that communicated, this is a serious place where serious things get decided. His assistant offered her water. She took it. Gordon himself was 55, silver-haired, with the economy of movement of someone who measured every action for necessity. He shook her hand, indicated the chair across from his desk, and sat down. He asked her 3 questions before she could say anything beyond her name. Do you want to save the marriage? No, she said. Do you want him to know you know? Not yet. Are you safe? Yes. Good, he said. Here is what happens next. He listened to everything without expression. He asked 7 follow-up questions, each one precise, each one pointing at something she had not yet thought to examine. By the end of the meeting, he had outlined a preliminary strategy, identified the key financial issues, and referred her to a forensic accountant named Delia Park, who he described as thorough to the point of inconvenience. She drove home. She sat in her car in the driveway, in the exact spot where she had sat 4 nights ago, and she noticed something different. Her hands on the steering wheel were steady. She was not waiting for courage to go inside. She was thinking about next steps. She went inside. She checked her phone before going through the door. Once, twice, 3 times. Lock, unlock, lock. She put it in her bag. She went in. That Thursday, Delia Park called her. She had found the LLC. She had found the registered address of the LLC, which was a condominium in the Riverside district. She had found the deed to the condominium. Douglas Whitmore had purchased a condominium 11 months ago. It was registered in both his name and Renata Spence's name. He had used $80,000 from the home equity line of credit to do it, the line of credit that was secured against their house. Claire sat in her car in the parking garage of the building where she had just had a follow-up appointment with Gordon Aldridge, and she read Delia Park's emailed summary, and she felt something she had not expected. Not tears, not rage, clarity, perfect, cold clarity. She was going to get every single penny back. She was going to get the house and the children and her name and her mother's money. She was going to do it correctly and completely, and she was going to do it in a way that left nothing unaddressed. She had been the invisible thing in this marriage. The furniture, beautiful and useful and always in the same place. She was not going to be furniture anymore. She started the car. She drove home. The worst part of the waiting was the ordinary moments. It was not the lying awake. She had adapted to lying awake. She had her ceiling tiles, her mental lists, her quiet inventory of the day's information. That was, strangely, manageable. It was the ordinary moments. Douglas making her coffee on Sunday morning, the way he had always made it, the way she had let him make it for 17 years without remembering that she actually preferred it stronger. Douglas asking if she had seen his blue tie. Douglas watching television beside her on the couch, his shoulder almost touching hers, the familiar weight of him. She sat through all of it. She smiled at the right times. She was very tired. Patrice Whitmore called on a Tuesday. This was unusual. Patrice called on Sundays, reliably, at 6 in the evening. Tuesday mornings were not a Patrice Whitmore calling time. Her voice was careful in a way that Claire now read fluently. It was the voice Patrice used when she was preparing to say something that was not what she meant to say. I was wondering if you might want to have lunch this week. Just the two of us. It's been too long. Of course, Claire said. Thursday? They went to the club. Patrice's place, Patrice's table, Patrice's territory. She arrived first and was already seated when Claire walked in, her silver hair perfect, her posture perfect, her face arranged in the careful warmth she deployed like a tool. She had been managing Douglas's consequences for 30 years. It showed. They ordered. They discussed Shay's upcoming exams. They discussed a renovation Patrice was doing to the upstairs bathroom. They discussed the weather. Then there was a pause while Patrice arranged her napkin, and Claire waited. Douglas is going through something, Patrice began. Men at his age sometimes experience a kind of, "How long have you known?" Claire said. Patrice's hands went still on the napkin. The table between them was very quiet. 6 months, Patrice said, finally. The word cost her something. Claire could hear the cost of it. He came to me. He said he was going to end it. I told him he had to end it. I believed him. I thought, "You thought you could protect the family," Claire said. "You thought you could handle it before it reached me." I thought I was helping. "You were protecting him," Claire said. "You've been protecting him his whole life, from the consequences of things he chose to do. That's not help. That's something else." Patrice looked at her salad. For possibly the first time, In 17 years of lunches and Christmases and Sunday calls, Douglas's mother had nothing to say. Claire ate her lunch. She asked politely about the bathroom renovation. She hugged Patrice at the door and said it was lovely as always, and drove out of the parking lot of the club and turned onto the main road and allowed herself, for exactly 4 minutes, to be completely furious. Then she steadied. Then she called Sandra Whitmore. She had gotten the number from Gordon, who had it from Delia Park's research. Sandra picked up on the first ring. "I've been waiting for this call," Sandra said. Her voice was direct. Nothing like Patrice's careful management. Something more like Bev. The voice of someone who had been carrying a truth for too long and was relieved to set it down. "You didn't have to do what you did," Claire said. "Yes, I did. Someone should have done it years ago. I'm sorry it took me this long." They talked for an hour and 4 minutes. Claire sat in her car in the driveway, the engine off, the afternoon light going golden, and Sandra told her things about Douglas's history. A woman before Claire, a situation that had cost Patrice a significant amount of money, and a signed agreement, a pattern that went back to college, a family that had learned to contain the damage quietly, to label anyone who spoke up as dramatic, unstable, not to be trusted. They had labeled Sandra that way. Sandra, who had been Renata's work friend first, who had genuinely liked Renata, who had not understood the connection to her own cousin for months, and who, when she figured it out, had found she could not stay quiet. "Why didn't you tell me directly?" Claire asked. "Why the anonymous text?" "Because I know my cousin," Sandra said. "If you had come at him without documentation, without a lawyer, without being prepared, he would have made it about your reaction. He would have called you unstable. He would have had his mother backing him up. I needed you to have everything first." Claire was quiet. "You were protecting me," she said. "I was doing what I should have done years ago," Sandra said again. After the call, Claire went inside. Shea was at the kitchen counter doing homework. Neil was upstairs. The house smelled like the candles she had started lighting in the afternoons, a habit she had apparently developed without noticing, something vanilla and warm. She sat down at the table. She thought about Sandra, sidelined by her own family, for being dramatic, doing the only honest thing any of them had done in 14 months. She thought about Renata, dark-haired and laughing in a break-room photo, not knowing yet what she had walked into. She thought, "He is very good at this. He has been doing this for a long time, and he is very good at it, and I have been inside it, and I still could not see the full shape of it until now." She got up. She started making dinner. She was going to be very careful now. There were 2 children watching everything she did. Whatever she was after this, she was going to be it in front of them. The call came on a Friday afternoon. She was folding laundry, Shay's sweatshirts, Neil's soccer socks, the routine domestic rhythm of a Friday. The unknown number came up. She answered it on the second ring now. She answered every unknown number. "Is this Claire Whitmore?" "Yes." "My name is Renata Spence." A pause. "Please don't hang up." Claire put down the shirt she was folding. She sat on the edge of the bed. She looked at the window, at the afternoon light, at the magnolia tree in the backyard that was just beginning to bud. "Okay," she said. "I didn't know he was married." Renata's voice was measured but not rehearsed. It had the quality of something said many times in private before being said out loud. "I know how that sounds. I know you probably don't believe me, but I need you to know that when I found out, I ended it. I ended it the same week." "When did you find out?" Claire asked. 8 months ago, when I was 4 months pregnant." Claire looked at the magnolia tree. He told me you were separated, Renata continued. He said you had asked for space, that you were co-parenting while you figured out the divorce timeline. He showed me things, a second mailing address, messages that I now understand were staged. He had a whole construction of it. He had put a lot of thought into it. He is very good at this, Claire said. Yes, Renata said it flatly, with the resignation of someone who had completely processed the data. Sandra told me she was my work friend before she was his cousin. I didn't know the connection for months. When she figured it out, she came to me first. She tried to handle it through the family. When that didn't work, she came to you. Everything settled into place. Claire had been carrying pieces of this for 2 weeks, individual pieces, and now the last one was in her hand. The picture was complete. Why did she tell me not to react? She asked. Because she knows Douglas. She knew if you confronted him before you had everything, documentation, a lawyer, a strategy, he would use your reaction against you. He would make you the volatile one. He would make you the reason everything fell apart. Sandra needed you to be ready first. Claire closed her eyes for a moment. She opened them. The condo, she said. Renata was quiet. He bought it with our money, Claire said. It was not an accusation. It was just the fact, stated clearly. I didn't know that either, Renata said. I'm working with my own attorney. I'm not asking you for anything. I'm not expecting anything from you. I just needed you to know the truth. You deserve to know the truth. They were quiet together for a moment. 2 women in separate rooms, both of them in the aftermath of the same man. Claire thought about anger. She had plenty of anger. But the anger, she realized, was all aimed in one direction, not at the woman on the phone, at the man who had built 2 separate truths and lived comfortably in both. Thank you, Claire said, for calling. I'm sorry, Renata said. I know that's inadequate. I'm sorry. How are you? Claire asked. The question surprised her. She had not planned to ask it. Managing, Renata said. My brother Marcus is here. He's been... She paused. He showed up at your attorney's office last week. I didn't ask him to. He just decided he was going to make sure I was protected. I'm told he accidentally brought some documents that were helpful to your case. Yes, Claire said. Gordon mentioned that. Marcus is like that. He just does things and explains them later. There was something almost like the beginning of a rueful laugh in Renata's voice. Not at the situation, just at the specific quality of Marcus, whoever he was. Is there anything you need? Claire asked. Another pause, longer this time. No, Renata said. I have what I need. I have my daughter coming. I have my brother. I have the truth. Finally. That's enough. They said goodbye. Claire sat on the edge of the bed for a long time. She thought about the anonymous text at the dinner table, the yellow sun emoji as a contact photo, the photo labeled site visits, the spice cabinet at midnight, 14 months of texts, the beach vacation, Thursday conference call. The way Douglas had kissed her temple on their anniversary and meant it, she was fairly sure, in whatever way he was capable of meaning anything. She thought he hadn't broken her. He had revealed very thoroughly how much she had already broken herself trying to hold him together. She got up. She went to the kitchen. She made dinner. She made it well. The worst Tuesday was not the Tuesday Douglas was served. It was the Tuesday before. Shea came home from school that afternoon with a question she had been carrying since morning. Claire could tell from the way she sat down at the kitchen counter, the careful way she set her bag down, the particular stillness she had that meant she was working up to something. Her friend's parents were splitting up. Her friend had said she'd known for months because of the texture of the house, the way the air changed, the silences at dinner. Her friend had said it was worse not knowing than knowing. Shay looked at her mother. Are you and Dad okay? 16 years old, her grandmother's eyes, watching everything. We're working some things out, Claire said. She kept her voice even. She was getting very good at keeping her voice even. Shay studied her for a moment, the way she studied things, carefully, not looking away. Okay, she said, but if something was actually wrong, you'd tell me, right? You wouldn't just... Yes, Claire said. Yes, I would tell you. Shea nodded. She picked up her bag. She went upstairs. Claire waited until she heard Shay's door close. Then she went to the bathroom and sat down on the floor of the shower, fully dressed, and cried for 18 minutes with the exhaust fan running. She counted the minutes. She had gotten into the habit of counting specific things: minutes, ceiling tiles, messages, bank transfers. Specificity was steadying. Specificity was the opposite of the vague, terrible formlessness of everything she was living inside. 18 minutes. Then she stopped. She got up. She washed her face. She went back to the kitchen and started dinner. That was the worst Tuesday, the one before. The actual Tuesday that Douglas was served was, by comparison, almost clean. Gordon had arranged it during a mid-morning meeting. Douglas called her 4 times before she picked up. What is this? He said. His voice was very controlled, in the way of a man who is not feeling controlled. Claire, we can talk about this. Whatever you think is happening, we are talking, she said. Through Gordon Aldridge. That's how we talk now. You're being dramatic. I'm being exact, she said. There's a difference. You should learn it. She hung up. He came home that evening. He had every legal right to come home. His name was still on the mortgage. She had prepared for this, had told Gordon she was prepared for this, had determined that she was not going to scream or break things or say things in front of the children that they would carry for the rest of their lives. He came in. He set his keys on the counter. He looked at her. This is not what you think, he said. She leaned against the kitchen counter with her arms folded and said nothing. The money. The financial stuff. It's complicated, and I should have been more transparent about it, I know that. But there are explanations, and if you just... Where would you like your things sent? She asked. His jaw tightened. You're not going to do this rationally, I see that. I've been very rational, she said. I've been rational for 3 weeks. Gordon Aldridge has been rational on my behalf. Delia Park has been quite rational with the financial documentation. It's all been very rational. He ran through the rest of the sequence then. She watched him do it the way you watch someone run a familiar program. The attack. You've been cold for years. I was lonely. What did you expect? The reverse? I can't believe you'd do this to the kids? Put them through a divorce? Tear apart a family for what? The minimizing? It wasn't what it looks like. It was complicated. It was never supposed to. She let him finish. Where, she said, would you like your things sent? That was when Shay appeared on the stairs. She had come down for water, probably. She stood at the bottom of the staircase in her pajamas and looked at the divorce papers on the table, and looked at her father, and looked at her mother. She picked up the papers. She read the first page. She put them down. She looked at her father for a long time. Then she went back upstairs. The absence of what Shay said was louder than anything either parent said in the 20 minutes that followed. Douglas left at 9:30 with a bag. He was going to Brett's, he said. She did not respond to this. She locked the front door after him. She stood in the hallway with her back against the door. She stood there for a long time. Then she went to Shay's room. She knocked. Come in, Shay said. Shay was sitting on her bed with her knees pulled up. She looked very young. She also looked very old. Claire sat on the edge of the bed. They sat together in the quiet of Shay's room that smelled like that pink sweet body spray and something warm from the diffuser Shay had gotten for her birthday. "It's going to be okay," Claire said. "I know," Shay said. "I know you know. I'm telling you anyway." Shay put her head on her mother's shoulder. They sat like that until Neil knocked on the door and asked what was happening and whether anyone wanted cereal. "Yes," Shay said. "Yes," Claire said. They all went downstairs and had cereal at 10:30 at night, and nobody talked very much. And it was, Claire thought, the most honest hour her family had spent together in a long time. She woke at 3 in the morning. She went to Shay's room. Shay was at a sleepover that night. The room was empty. She sat in Shay's desk chair in the dark. The room smelled like her daughter. The body spray, something sweet and warm, the particular smell of a teenage girl's room that was entirely its own thing. She sat there until 4 in the morning. She did not cry. She had no crying available. She just sat in her daughter's room and thought, "I have to be very careful now. There are 2 children watching everything I do. Whatever I do next, I do in front of them. Whatever I am after this, I am in front of them." She thought about her mother. Her mother had been widowed at 52 and had not collapsed, had not performed the not collapsing, had simply gotten up each morning and done what the morning required. Claire had watched this as a young woman and thought she understood it. She had not understood it until now. Getting up was the whole thing. Getting up correctly was the work. She went back to her room at 4:15. She slept until 6. She got up, she made breakfast. On Saturday morning, she made pancakes. Douglas was gone. The house was hers and the children's. The specific absence of him was not the devastating hollow she had feared. It was air. Space she had not known was occupied. She made the batter from scratch, not from the box. The way her mother had made it, with a little vanilla and a little more butter than the recipe said. The kitchen was quiet at first. Just the sound of mixing and the hiss of butter in the pan and the coffee maker doing its routine noise. Neil appeared in the doorway at 8:45, still in pajamas, sliding on the hardwood in his socks. He immediately poured too much orange juice and had to drink some out of the glass before he could put it on the table. "Is that actual pancakes?" he asked. "Real pancakes," she said. "From a box?" "No." He made a sound of genuine approval and climbed onto the counter stool. She turned the radio on low. Something without words. The kitchen smelled like butter and vanilla and coffee. The particular warmth of a Saturday morning. The smell that meant nothing was required for a few hours. Shay came down at 9. She sat at the counter beside Neil. She did not say anything for a few minutes. She watched her mother cook. "Mom," she said. "Are you okay?" Claire considered this. Not quickly. She stood at the stove and actually considered it. "I'm going to be," she said. "I really think I'm going to be." Shay was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Good." One word, but the way she said it. They ate breakfast, all 3 of them, at the kitchen table. After breakfast, Claire told them. She had been planning the telling for a week, had thought about it in the car and in the shower, and at 3 in the morning, in Shay's desk chair, she had decided. Not dramatic, not minimizing, not performance. Just truth at the level they could receive it. Their father and she were separating. It was not their fault. Nothing about their immediate lives, their home, their schools, their relationships with both parents, was going to disappear. She answered the questions they had. Neil cried briefly, a clean cry, and then wanted to watch a show. She put it on for him and sat beside him for 20 minutes. Shay helped clear the plates. He did something, Shay said at the sink. It was not a question. Yes, Claire said. Something bad. Yes. Shay rinsed a plate and handed it to Claire to dry. Are you going to be okay, though? Shay asked again. Actually, Claire said. Yes, I actually am. Shay nodded. She handed her another plate. They did the dishes together, without speaking, and it was, Claire thought, one of the best conversations she had ever had with her daughter. That Sunday, Bev came over. They sat on the back porch with wine, even though it was only 4 in the afternoon, because they were adults, and the situation was adequate justification. The yard was coming into spring. The hydrangeas were starting. The flagstone path was brightening up from the winter gray. I never trusted him, Bev said. I want to say that for the record. I am saying it for the record. I know you didn't, Claire said. You knew? Of course I knew. You don't think I could tell? Then why didn't you ever ask me why? Claire turned her wine glass in her hands. She thought about this honestly. Because I didn't want to say it out loud yet, she said. I was more afraid of losing my life than I was of living a lie. That's not your fault. That's mine. Bev was quiet. I already knew, Claire said. That's what I keep landing on. Somewhere deep down, I already knew. I just loved him more than I trusted myself, and I will never, I mean never, do that again. She said it like a statement, like a fact about herself that was now true and had always been true, and she was simply naming it. Not for Bev, for herself. The settlement was signed on a Tuesday 3 weeks later. Gordon called her that morning and told her the terms Douglas had agreed to. She listened. She said yes to each item. She drove downtown. She signed her name 7 times. She stood up and shook Gordon's hand. Congratulations, Gordon said, in the dry way of someone who had seen many endings and knew how to mark them without sentimentality. Thank you, she said, for everything. You did most of it, he said. She was not sure that was entirely true, but she took it. She got the house until the children completed high school. Full recovery of all redirected funds, plus documented interest. Primary residential custody with generous regular access for Douglas, which she had asked for specifically because she had never wanted to damage their father's relationship with her children. She got back everything he had taken. She got the accounting of her marriage made correct. She did not feel triumphant walking to the elevator. She felt correct. She walked to her car, full stride, not checking anything. 6 weeks after the settlement, Renata called. Her daughter had been born. She was healthy, small and healthy, and entirely unaware of the complicated world she had been born into, which was, Renata said, probably for the best. I'm not going to raise her on his version of events, Renata said. When she's old enough to understand, she's going to know what actually happened. You don't have to do that for me, Claire said. I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for her. Claire thought about that for a long time after they hung up. A girl, somewhere across the city, growing up knowing the truth. Not justice exactly, but something. The truth standing up while it still mattered. She had lunch with Sandra Whitmore the following week, just the two of them, at a small Italian place that Douglas had never been to. Sandra was not what Patrice described. She was sharp and funny, and faintly exhausted in the way of people who have been carrying other people's truths for too long. She laughed easily. She ordered the pasta without looking at the menu, which meant she'd been here before, which meant she had a whole life, that the family's version of her had nothing to do with. I want to say thank you, Claire said. Properly. Sandra waved a hand. I just did what anyone should have done years ago. You did it at exactly the right time, Claire said. Not a minute too early. Not a minute too late. Exactly when it needed to happen. Sandra looked at her across the table. Are you really okay? she asked. Because you look different, Claire said. Yes, I know, Claire said. I am. She was. She had started thinking about work again. A former colleague had called. She'd heard, vaguely, that Claire might be looking at getting back to it. Claire had been a good marketing director. Better than good. She had left because they moved cities for Douglas's career. She had told herself it was a choice. Technically, it had been a choice. She had a call scheduled for Thursday. She prepared for it the way she used to prepare for everything. Specifically, confidently, knowing her material. She made notes. She looked up the company. She thought about what she had to offer. Thursday came. The call went well. She scheduled a follow-up. She stood in the kitchen afterward, making coffee, and something shifted in her awareness. She had made coffee for 17 years in this kitchen. She had made it the way Douglas liked it. Medium strength, full fat milk, 2 sugars. She had made it that way for so long, she had forgotten she had ever had another preference. She looked at the mug in her hand. She thought, when did I stop making it the way I like it? She made a new cup. Strong, a small pour of oat milk. No sugar. She stood at the counter and drank it. It tasted exactly like coffee should taste. She laughed, a small private laugh, in her own kitchen at 9 in the morning, in a house that was hers. She picked up her phone and booked a flight to Rome. She had wanted to go for 20 years. She had mentioned it 3 times over the marriage. Each time it had been gently redirected. Douglas preferred beach destinations, or the schedule didn't work. Or they could go later, next year eventually. She booked a flight, 1 name on the reservation. She did not overthink it. She closed the laptop and finished her coffee. She was in the new apartment on a Wednesday evening, not the house. She was still in the house with the children for now. The house was stable, the children's world was stable. But she had found a sublet, small and bright with tall windows facing west, for the days when the children were with Douglas. She had been filling it slowly, bringing books in boxes, choosing each thing deliberately. She was putting books on shelves, her books. She had taken them from the house over several trips, sorted them from his, at the kitchen table. While Neil helped and Shay pretended not to be interested, and then absolutely was, she discovered which books were always hers, the ones she had brought to the marriage, the ones she had found herself and read alone. She put her favorite novel on the top shelf, center, where she could see it from the door. It was the book she had read 4 times and never mentioned to Douglas because he would have made a face. The slight dismissive face he made at things that didn't interest him. The face she had learned to preempt by not bringing up the things that might produce it. Books, cities she wanted to visit, opinions she held, preferences she had. She stood back and looked at the shelf. She thought about what she had traded. Not comfort for uncertainty, not security for freedom. Those were the obvious translations. What she had actually traded was quieter and more specific. She had traded her own taste, her own preferences, her own fully formed self for the idea that a good wife was a woman who became porous to her husband's needs, who absorbed his preferences until they replaced her own, who stopped being a person and became a companion shape. She had been very good at it. She put the next book on the shelf, her mother's copy of a novel she had been given at 12, the spine cracked in 3 places from rereading. She thought about her mother. Her mother had not been a woman who disappeared. She had been a woman who was fully, specifically herself. In her kitchen, in her opinions, in her loves, in her garden. She had not been easy. She had been real. Claire had wanted to be like her and had spent 17 years becoming smaller instead. She was putting the books back, one by one, shelf by shelf. She sat down on the floor of the new apartment, surrounded by half-empty boxes, and took out a notepad. She had been carrying it for 2 weeks, ever since that evening on the back porch with the wine when she had thought, what else didn't I know I liked? She uncapped the pen. She wrote at the top, "Things that are mine," she began. The coffee, strong, oat milk, no sugar. The back left table at the small Italian place on 5th Street. Road trips rather than resorts. Reading until 2 in the morning when a book is genuinely good. The blue dress. It stays in the closet because I looked good, and I know I looked good, and I am not surrendering a dress to a night that doesn't deserve it. Silence in the morning before anyone else is awake. Neil sliding on the hardwood and socks. Shay handing me a plate at the sink. My mother's lemon pound cake. The work. The work I was good at. She looked at the last item for a long time. She thought about the Thursday call, the follow-up scheduled for next week, the thing that had come back to her so easily, like a language she had not spoken in years but had never actually forgotten. She thought about the trip to Rome. 6 weeks away, one name on the reservation. She capped the pen. She got up. She finished putting the books on the shelf. Her books, in her order, in her apartment. On a Wednesday evening, when she had nowhere to be and nothing to manage and no one to perform for. The apartment was quiet. The windows had gone from gold to blue in the evening light. She made tea. She had a preference about tea, too, she was discovering, a very specific preference about tea that had been silent for years. And she stood at the window and looked at the city, a city she had chosen, a neighborhood she had wanted, different from the suburb, closer in, noisier in a way that felt alive rather than intrusive. The prison door had been unlocked all along. She had been her own warden, and the moment she stopped being the warden, the door simply opened. She walked through. That was all. She finished her tea. She put the mug in the sink. She picked up her phone. She was meeting Bev for dinner. Not for any reason. Just dinner. A small place, good bread, the kind of place where the tables were close together, and it smelled like something warm from the kitchen. She was ready early. She sat in the apartment, her apartment, in the chair she had chosen, facing the window she had chosen, and she thought about the dinner at Carmine's 17 years ago. First date, Douglas, younger, leaning forward across the table, asking her questions, genuinely interested, or doing a convincing performance of genuine interest. She had thought, this one pays attention. She had not been wrong that he paid attention. She had just learned, too slowly, the difference between paying attention and paying attention selectively, in the ways that served him. She thought about the dinner 3 weeks ago, her wedding anniversary, the candlelight, the bread basket, the Barolo she hadn't chosen, his hands, his laugh, the phone buzzing once on her lap, under the white linen tablecloth. She thought, if she could have seen that night, where she would be in 3 weeks. This apartment, this chair, this window, this list on a notepad, this trip to Rome, this job call, this cup of tea made the way she actually liked it. She would not have believed it. She would have thought she was looking at someone else's life, but here it was, her life. She got up, she got her coat, she went to dinner. Bev was already at the table when she arrived. She stood up when she saw Claire come through the door. Not to hug, just stood up. The way you stand for someone. You look different, Bev said. I know. Good different. I know, Claire said again. She smiled. She sat down. The bread arrived. It was warm. She took a piece and ate it, and it tasted exactly like bread should taste. Like something real, in the present moment, in a place she had chosen. She looked at her best friend across the table. She thought, there is nothing in my purse tonight that can destroy my life. There is nothing anyone can text me that I cannot survive. I am 41 years old, and I know how I like my coffee, and I know what I want, and I know who I am, and I am going to be so embarrassingly, unexpectedly fine. The waiter came. She ordered the thing she wanted, not the thing anyone else would have chosen, not the safer choice, or the more practical choice, or the choice that would generate no commentary. The thing she wanted. Good choice, Bev said. She hadn't started over. That phrase had bothered her, even in the worst of it, as though the first 41 years were a draft to be crumpled and discarded. She hadn't started over. She had started forward. Every version of herself came with her. The woman who had stayed too long, the woman who had finally stopped staying, the woman who had sat in a restaurant on her anniversary and read 11 words and held herself completely together, the woman who had sat on the edge of a bathtub at 2 in the morning and made a list, attorney, bank accounts, her sister, the woman who had reorganized the spice cabinet at midnight because it was the one thing she could control, the woman who had told her children the truth in the only way she knew how. All of it, all of her. She had not shed a self. She had reclaimed one. Outside, through the restaurant window, the city made its usual beautiful noise. Someone laughing too loudly on the sidewalk. A cab? Music from somewhere, faint and indistinct, drifting in under the door. Bev was talking about something funny that had happened at work. A story that was building toward a punchline Claire could see coming and was already smiling at. She picked up her water glass. She leaned forward. She listened. The dinner was good. The bread was warm. She realized, with something that felt almost like surprise, exactly where she wanted to be. Closing disclaimer. The content on this channel is carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to bring you stories of meaning, resilience, and the kind of wisdom that only comes from walking through hard things. All characters and situations are fictional. Any resemblance to real persons or events is entirely coincidental. Our goal is simple: to make sure that no woman ever feels alone in her story.